Thank you for joining us today for a webinar with VCU Alumni called The Vaccine, a live Q&A with infectious disease experts. All during the month of January, we have focused on wellness, so we thank you for taking this journey with us with VCU Alumni. My name is Dr. Amy Gray-Beck. I'm the Executive Director for Alumni Relations at VCU and a proud alumna of the School of Education from 2019. We will be recording this webinar and captioning it and sharing it on our YouTube channel for later viewing. You can catch all of our previous virtual programs and Q&As on the VCU Alumni YouTube channel. So think back to March of 2020, almost a year ago. At VCU Alumni in the office, we knew that in-person events would cease for an unknown period of time. So I reached out to an expert here at VCU that could help answer some of our questions. That person was Dr. Hylton Gravatt. And she answered your questions about COVID-19 back almost a year ago over Facebook Live. It was our first Facebook Live event, actually. Things looked a little bit different. And it was the highest attended event we held last year. I will link it in the chat box if you missed it, but you can see her and I together almost a year ago. So we asked her back, and we have a VCU professor from the School of Pharmacy here to help us moderate because we have more questions, more complex questions, more questions of hope and fear. And so in order to answer as many of your questions as possible, let's start now. Today we have some questions to get us kicked off in addition to a ton of submitted questions from the registration form. But attendees, you can put your questions in the chat feature or the Q&A feature on webinar or in Facebook comments, and we'll pull them all and try to answer as many as we can. So I'd like to introduce our moderator for this afternoon, Dr. David Holdford. Dr. Holdford is a professor in VCU School of Pharmacy in the Department of Pharmacotherapy and Outcome Science. Holdford received his BS in pharmacy from the University of Illinois, his MS from Ohio State, and PhD from South Carolina. Prior to entering academia, he practiced as a hospital pharmacist in Chicago and South Carolina. Dr. Holdford conducts research, teaches, and consults in health outcomes research, pharmaceutical marketing, and leadership development. He's the author of several published textbooks in pharmacy and has authored over 100 papers and book chapters in healthcare and business publications. Dr. Holdford, welcome, and thank you for moderating our live Q&A today.
Thank you, Amy. So I just want everyone to know that you and any other people participating in this Facebook Live event are free to call me David, Dave, or Dr. Holdford. Frankly, I'm still trying to get some of my former students, Raphael, who are now colleagues, to call me by my first name, but it hasn't been successful yet. So I'm very excited to be moderating this live Q&A today, and I can think of no better person to be working with than Dr. Leigh Anne Hylton Gravatt. This event is being offered to answer your questions about the COVID-19 vaccine. We have a few questions which have already been submitted by people who have registered for this webinar, but we'd also like to answer your live questions. We're going to provide up-to-date answers to many of your questions, as many as possible. We have a large number, but we're going to try to get as many as possible in the time available. So let me first introduce the real expert on this event, Dr. Gravatt. Dr. Leigh Anne Hylton Gravatt is an associate professor and vice chair of education in the Department of Pharmacotherapy and Outcome Science at the VCU School of Pharmacy. She is a 2003 alumna of the VCU School of Pharmacy, and after pharmacy school, she went on to complete a PGY1 residency at University of North Carolina Hospitals and a PGY2 residency in adult internal medicine. She's a pharmacy clinical specialist in internal medicine at VCU Health. Dr. Gravatt has been active in internal medicine for the past 15 years, serving for the first 5 years as a clinical specialist in cardiology and internal medicine, and for the past 10 years in a joint role as professor coordinating and teaching in the infectious disease therapeutic module, and serving as a preceptor for students and residents in the internal medicine acute care setting. I'm thrilled to be working with Dr. Gravatt, who I've known since she was a pharmacy student back in the early 2000s. We've been both colleagues and friends for years, so if you don't mind, I'm going to call her by her first name throughout this session, and I expect her to call me David. Is that okay with you, Leigh Anne?
I'm okay with that, David.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to say before I start asking you questions from our registrants and live attendees?
No, I hope today, more than anything, you can come out of this session feeling like you had more information than what you came in with this, and that you feel like you can make an informed decision about the vaccines moving forward. And that's really my main goal for today.
Okay. So first question. This is a big one, but you can answer it.
Okay.
It's been over 10 months since your last Facebook Live event. Can you summarize in general terms how things have changed in the last 10 months in the fight against COVID-19?
You know, I think there was a lot of things that we did not know in those 10 months. First off, we did not know how long was this going to last, and here we are. I think if you even told us at that time how long things were going to last, we really weren't sure at that time. So since then, we've learned quite a bit. We've learned both how to diagnose, how to do what we can to try to prevent it. And we also now have some strategies to help us in the prevention, but also how to best treat COVID-19. So I feel like we're not even on the same playing field than what we were back in March when we initially talked on that item. And especially when it comes to prevention, initially we knew that certain mitigation strategies were going to be important. So that included things like social distancing, making sure to limit our exposure to other individuals. Masking then came next, and more data with, the importance of masking. And then this next part has been, what can we do? What else can we do to prevent this disease? And vaccines is an important piece of that. And we were able to very quickly get some vaccines to market and out into individuals, which has been amazing, honestly.
Oh, so now you brought up the COVID vaccines. What are our current options available on the market right now, and ones that are going to be happening in the near future?
Absolutely. So currently in the United States, we have 2 approved vaccines, one from Pfizer and one from Moderna. Both of these are 2 vaccine series. So you have to get one at one point, one either 21 or 28 days, depending on which injection you get later. So those are already approved and being used right now in individuals and have been since about the end of December. We have 2 additional ones that are getting closer to being approved and on the market. And one of those being the AstraZeneca vaccine, also a 2-dose series. It's approved over in the UK and Europe, but not in the United States yet. When I last looked, it looks like they're planning on submitting their data a little bit later on, probably the spring, to our FDA. And then the next one would be the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, this one's different in that it's a 1-dose vaccine. So there's a lot of hype around this particular vaccine. They also seem to be closing out some of their trials. So we think we'll probably have some data being submitted to the FDA in the coming months.
So is there any difference in the effectiveness between the vaccines or the vaccines in general population and any specific populations, for example, like people that are over age 65?
So I think that's a great question. Overall, the efficacy of both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines were found to be very similar. Moderna vaccine, the overall efficacy was about 94.5%. The Pfizer vaccine was 95% effective. So overall effectiveness, very similar between the 2 vaccines. Now, if we look at subpopulations within that, there does seem to be a tiny bit of a difference, but it's hard to compare because we weren't necessarily doing this in the same individuals, right? So it's not necessarily a head-to-head trial between the 2 different vaccines. The Moderna vaccine in individuals that are 65 and older seem to be effective in about 85% of the individuals, versus with the Pfizer vaccine, it was closer to 92%. So it was a slight improvement with the Pfizer particular trial, but in the Moderna trial, one thing that they noted is that their actual event rate and the number of those who were infected with COVID were much lower than what they had anticipated overall. So they feel like that was part of the reason why. So I think we're going to know a little bit more as more data comes out and as we're using it in the general population. But overall, they're very, very similar.
Okay, there's some specific populations that they have not been indicated for, and we're going to ask more questions later on that. But can you tell me what populations is it been approved for and what populations have not been approved for?
Okay, so those who have been approved is the Pfizer was approved for individuals 18 and older. There's no cap on that particular age. And then for the Moderna, Pfizer has been 16 and older, and then for Moderna is 18 and older. So Pfizer has been approved in individuals a little bit younger. And we'll talk a little bit more about, there are some ongoing trials with both of the vaccines in adolescents, so 12 to 16 range. So I think we're going to know a little bit more about that particular range. So that would be one particular difference. Pfizer is approved for 16 and older. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. Now, what are the individuals that were not included in these trials? So those who were pregnant were not included in these trials, those who were lactating, and also patients that were on particular types of immunosuppression. So anybody that was on heavy immunosuppression or on concurrent steroids within the last 28 days, they were not included in this particular trial. So those are kind of the unknown vectors in these particular ones. Not that they're not high risk, but they just weren't included in the trials.
Okay, we're going to get back to some of those more specific questions later on, but do people really have a choice when it comes to getting the vaccine? And should they really care about which one they choose? Does it matter that whether you're getting the Moderna one or the Pfizer one? What is it? What's your best? Does it make a difference, and should it?
So does it make a difference, and should it? I think for the most part and for most individuals, the answer is no. I do think that there are certain instances where it may be more preferable to have one versus the other. I think what a lot of places are seeing right now is they're only able to get a certain vaccine, whether it be because of availability or because of the storage requirements that are for certain ones. So for example, the Pfizer vaccine requires these specialty freezers, and not every place has the ability to keep those particular vaccines in those special environments. So in some ways, you may have to get what's available. The other piece is that, again, it goes back to the age group. I think that could be important because let's say you have a 16-year-old that you want to vaccinate. Right now, the one that's approved for that is the Pfizer. So I think that goes back to having that information. I actually had an individual reach out to me who has an alpha-gal allergy. And those individuals are allergic to meat products, including dairy and eating the meat as well. It's usually a tick-borne virus, a tick-borne vector that then creates this particular allergy. So I actually contacted both of the companies about this. And it's interesting because they tell you that, there's no animal products involved in either one. But if you look further in some of the information that Pfizer sent me, it turns out that some of the initial products are using milk products from cows. And so for that reason, I said, probably with your severe allergy that you have, I would probably more than likely use the Moderna and not the Pfizer. So I do think there's some specific times where you may want to use one versus the other.
That's really very interesting. I never heard about that. Okay, so people are really interested in the safety of the drugs or side effects. Can you tell me a little bit about if I got a vaccination, what kind of side effects would I expect normally, and which ones that are kind of different should I pay attention to?
Absolutely. So I think there's going to be some things which are known side effects, and then some other things that we're just going to want to look out for. In general, with any vaccine, we're going to want to look out for any kind of immediate type of hypersensitivity. And so that's one of the reasons why, and now actually in the drug trials, they did not have individuals having any of those immediate type hypersensitivity. However, that has happened once they have released it into the general public. So that's one of the reasons why with both of these vaccines, they are recommending that there's an observation period of about 15 minutes after you receive the vaccine. So that way that we can observe to make sure that you're not having an allergic reaction to this. In general, the incidence of this is extremely low. So low that calculating a percentage is very hard to do even. I mean, you can count it between, your fingers at this point of how many cases that we're talking about. So very, very low incidence of that. Now, other side effects is you're going to have a sore arm. So injection site types of reactions can be common and they're likely going to happen. Injection site pain, that kind of thing. I've had both of mine. I had the Moderna. Both times I can tell you I had a sore arm the next day for sure, but then that definitely improved with time. So other things that you're going to be looking out for that are normal is things like fever, which is not extremely common, but headache and fatigue tend to be the ones that are the more common ones that you're going to see. It does seem like more people are having these particular side effects with the second dose versus the first dose. And it kind of makes sense that that is happening just because your immune system, the first time it sees it, it's never seen it before. So it's kind of chewing it up, it's making the antibodies. The second time, that booster dose it's like, I've seen you before, you're not supposed to be here. So your immune system is like, I have memory cells, I'm going to attack that. And so you do tend to have a more pronounced effect by that second dose. And so it does seem like more people are having some of those side effects. Other things to look out for that are common and again are just side effects and that do tend to go away is lymph node swelling. That can happen again. That's showing that your immune system is waking up. It's having a reaction to the spike proteins that your body is producing and creating those memory cells. So that way the next time it sees it, it's like, nope, we're going to get you out of here. So I think that those are going to be the important things. Really serious side effects were extremely, extremely rare in the particular trials. So it's really those, known side effects that you're going to be looking out for. The other interesting thing, I think is kind of interesting, is that it seems like younger patients are having the side effects versus older patients. So the majority of the side effects are happening in those that are 55 and younger. So there's some benefits to being older and getting this vaccine, and that you're going to have less side effects. So I think that is kind of neat too to kind of hear about. But
so what you're saying is pretty likely almost anybody, and not universally, if you get a vaccine, you're going to get a sore arm, and you might feel a little punky.
Yep.
Which is a technical term, punky. But
okay.
But that punkiness is really telling you that it's working.
Yes, it's showing that your immune system is showing up to do its job.
So feeling punky is a good thing in this case.
I think it probably is a good thing, but I think a lack of feeling punky is also not a reason for concern. So I want to go on the opposite side of that. If you think, oh gosh, I got it and I had no side effects. I'm happy to share with you that my first injection, I had no side effects. I had arm soreness. The second one, I had more side effects. So about 12 hours after I had my injection, started with chills. Then later on, I had some fever, headache, then, some of the muscle aches. But within 12 hours of that starting and just being tired, I felt better, completely back to normal. So.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to it. I have not gotten the injection yet. I fall out of every category I would like to. I will get the first one that's available. I don't care where it is. I'm going,
I know.
The US approved ones, yes.
Exactly. As soon as I can figure out a way, David, you and everyone else, I know. I would love for everyone that wants to get one as soon as possible, quite honestly.
So there's no reason to wait.
No, there's no reason to wait. If you have, the only reason why you should wait on the vaccine is if you're going through an acute illness right now, they are recommending for there to be a 2-week period. And the same thing, if you've recently gotten another vaccination, they are requesting a 2-week period and for you to be asymptomatic at the time of getting the injection. But otherwise, there's no real reason to be delaying it. Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of misinformation about COVID vaccines, and I just want you to address a really, really important one relating to this misinformation. Can you get a COVID infection from the vaccine itself? And if you cannot, why?
You absolutely cannot get COVID from taking this vaccine. And the reason is how this vaccine is formulated, which I think is super cool. Is the first time that this type of technology has been approved, but not the first time it's been studied. This technology has actually been studied for the last 15 to 20 years in various forms. And what they do is that instead of what we usually do with vaccines, which is we either give you a live virus, okay, like a smaller amount of the virus, and then you mount an immune response to that, or we give you a deadened type of virus, and then you make a response to that, similar to what you do with the flu virus. We do that with that one. Instead of doing it that way, what they've done is taken a piece of the virus itself. And for this time, I know a lot of people have seen the coronavirus with the little spikes on the outside, little spiky things. They've taken a piece of that and they've given instructions of how to make more of just those spike proteins, not the actual virus, but just the things that go around the virus, the spike proteins. And once it gets inside of your body, your immune system chews it up and expresses it, and your immune system is like, what are those things? We should not be having those in our body. And so it mounts a response to the spike proteins. So we're not giving you any of the DNA of that particular virus. So there's no way you can actually develop COVID by getting the COVID vaccine.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's start talking about some specific populations. In particular, people are really very much interested about vaccination in children. Courtney has asked a number of questions relating to that. So I'm going to put them into my own words. Have there been, so you said that there's no COVID vaccinations been approved in children in the US.
Yes.
And is that by design, and why did they do that?
Well, I think that's partially by design. In general, when you're doing a lot of these trials, they're not going to trial them out on developing individuals. And this is just something that's happened over time, but there's certain populations that people are a little bit wary about including in clinical trials. And children is one of them because they're developing. And if they don't really know what's going to happen, that's not going to be the first group that they're usually going to trial it out on, if there's another available option. Same thing with why we don't usually try it out in pregnant individuals before we try other individuals first. So that's part of the reason why. I will tell you, currently there are studies that are ongoing. So Pfizer actually just finished out their trial with looking at those are the 12 to 15 range. So we already have 16 and up approved. 12 to 15 range, their trials just ended. So I have a feeling that their data is going to be coming out soon. From what I've heard, they're also planning on doing another trial that's going to be looking at younger individuals. So stay tuned for that one. Moderna, they've also been enrolling individuals for their 12 to 18 range particular studies. That's still ongoing. So I think we might get that data a little bit later with Moderna. So they're definitely looking at it, and knowing the epidemiology of the disease and knowing that it seems like older children are ones that are more likely to transmit the virus to other individuals, it kind of makes sense that we're going in this fashion and that they would be looking at those versus the younger individuals.
Okay, so it makes sense that you would want to go after adults because they're at the greatest risk. And ethically, you want to go with people who can make these decisions. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So the timeline is later, but you can't tell me exactly any.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, I do think that as soon as they get the data, I do think the FDA would be more than happy to entertain it. Once they got the data with the adults, I mean, they met within about a week and a half, 2 weeks to be able to discuss the data. And then ACIP made their recommendations. It is the fastest that any vaccine or any drug has ever really come to market that we've seen like this. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But one of the things I will note is that there was no decrease in the rigor or what they expected from those trials, even though it was moving at a faster pace. It doesn't mean that they skipped steps in order to make it happen. So they still had to meet the same safety and efficacy requirements that they would for any other drug to get approved. But
So when we're also talking about adults, we're talking about adults of any type of race, Asian, African American, white. So it's safe and effective for all those populations.
yes, and actually, the trials were really trying to include a diverse population of individuals. I know the Moderna trial in particular, they were looking for as much diversity as they could when it came to including them. So if you look in comparison to other clinical trials, there is a decent amount of other populations that are represented that I don't think you typically see in most trials. So I think that's a benefit of this.
Okay. So you stated that none of these vaccines have been approved for women who are pregnant or lactating. So what do they do? I mean, what are their options?
So I think one of the things that you have to go to before you even go to that is thinking about, are pregnant women at a higher risk of developing COVID-19 complications? And the unfortunate answer is yes, they are. What we have found is that those individuals do have a potential for higher rates of certain types of complications, such as increased risk of stillborns and then a couple of other things. So it's not something that we want to have happen to pregnant mothers. Now, one thing that we can note is currently the recommendation is for pregnant mothers that are high risk for acquiring the disease. And right now they're looking at healthcare professionals or those who are going to be at an increased risk of being around other individuals to acquire the disease. The recommendation from multiple areas, including the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, is to take the vaccines. And basically, they've gone back through and looked at the detailed data, especially with the animal models of looking at the reproductive effects on animals. And based on that, they did not see any effects. The same thing I'll tell you, I know specifically in the Pfizer trial, there were several individuals that were screened at baseline for pregnancy that were not pregnant. However, during the trial, they became pregnant after they were exposed to the vaccine. And they're going to continue to monitor those individuals to see what happens. They've also started a registry as well that women who are pregnant who end up getting the vaccine to be able to enroll, to be able to track them as well. So it's something that we're getting more data on, but right now there is, the recommendation is if you are at high risk for acquiring the disease, and especially if you're in a healthcare environment, you need to go ahead and get the vaccine if possible.
So if a woman was lactating and or breastfeeding their children, would any of the immunity be passed on to the child? Is there any evidence of that?
So the short answer is we don't know. There's actually trials that are going on right now and there have been a ton of interest of individuals wanting to say, hey, here is my breast milk. Here was what it was before I started. Here's what it was after I took the vaccine. And so there's actually several trials that are ongoing to look at this right now. And I think we're going to know more data about that in the next couple of months. But it is recommended again for lactating women, even though they're not as at a higher risk of complications, but that there may be a benefit as far as being able to pass antibodies to the infant from a theoretical standpoint. And so there is a recommendation that if you are in that higher risk group to go ahead and get vaccinated.
Okay. So if you have let's go to another group. If you have a history of allergies, what precautions should you take if you want to get the vaccine?
So, and I think that when some of these reports came out about the occurrences of anaphylaxis, a lot of different information was swirling out there about, oh my gosh, if you have this allergy, you should avoid it, or this allergy. And so the short answer is, and if you look at the CDC recommendations, they say no history of previous allergies should prevent you from getting this particular vaccine. The only ones that they're saying in precaution is those individuals who have had severe reactions to allergies, specifically Guillain-Barré is one of those that we just don't have enough data on right now. But outside of that, even if you have nut allergies, food allergies, animal allergies, all of those, they recommend for you to go ahead and get the vaccine if possible. So they actually just say, normal precautions. There's no need in doing pre-medicating prior to that or anything like that. And that's one of the reasons why individuals have that 15-minute time span that they should be waiting just to observe and make sure that there's no adverse reactions when that occurs. So.
Okay, good. Let's talk about its efficacy and the immunity. So how long does it take to get the effect or immunity after the first dose? And then, so I know you get some immunity after the first dose. How long does that take? And then you get some immunity after the full immunity after the second dose. What's the time periods on those?
So what we know is what they actually laid out in the clinical trials. So I wish we had day by day. We know what day does it actually all becomes effective and you're free. But based on the trials, so let's go with the Pfizer one first, since that was the first one out on the market. You really see a difference at about day 10 on that particular injection. And within that's when you start seeing a difference between those who received the injection and those who got the placebo when it comes to rates of COVID-19. After the first injection, you get about 52% efficacy at about day 10. So that's good news, but it's not 100%. But to put it in perspective, though, if you think about your traditional flu vaccine, the traditional flu vaccine, depending on the age group that you're using, is somewhere around 65% efficacy in younger individuals, and then a little bit lower in older individuals. So this right on mark with that. Now, they looked at for Pfizer, what was the efficacy at 7 days post the last injection, and that's where you get that 95%. So you get a much higher rate of immunity once you get that second dose, and once we're looking at 7 days post that dose. For the Moderna, very similar. After about 10 days, you're going to get a higher one, which is interesting. And I don't exactly know why there's a difference there, but it's about 80.2% efficacy after about 10 days compared to the placebo. So that's really great. One dose, 80%. And then after the second dose, 94.5%. So higher after that second dose. So, and again, this is a lot higher even than what we have seen with previous trials with previous vaccines. So it's pretty amazing, actually, when you're looking at the efficacy. So are you getting some benefit after that first dose? Absolutely. But is it 100%? No, it's not. So that's the reason why it is important to try to go ahead, get the entire series so you can be more protected.
So Tara asked in the chat, how long is that going to last?
The short answer is we don't know. No, nobody wants me to say that, but I know. I wish I had a crystal ball and it said we have immunity for this long. Now, what I can tell you, we know that you have immunity for at least about 6 months because we have about 6 months worth of data to be able to show you, and so we know that that is occurring. However, much longer than that, we really don't know. Moderna has released some things that say that they're extending that out to, hey, we have 8 months worth of data. So maybe 8 months, but over and beyond that, we really don't know. And I know that's unnerving for people to think, well, what does that mean? Do I have to get a shot next year? Do I have to go and get my antibodies tested? similar to sometimes what we have to do with hepatitis. What is it that I need to do with that? And the short answer is we really don't know. We're operating, we're building the plane as we're flying it right now, and we're going to find that out the longer we go. So I think we'll have more information.
So 2 weeks after my second shot, I should just throw away all my masks, right?
No, don't do that. Okay, there's a couple of different reasons why I would recommend to not do that. The recommendation is, one thing is, think about the way these things were studied. These trials were done in individuals who were still being recommended to mask and to do social distance. So those efficacy rates are all predicated on you doing those things. So that's issue one. The other thing is, if you look at the primary outcomes for both trials, it was the incidence of symptomatic COVID-19 infections. They did not study those who were asymptomatic carriers. Now, I will tell you, Moderna did gather more data on that, but they have not published that at this point. So we do not know if there's a potential for you to be infected, be asymptomatic, and potentially transmit that to others. And so for that reason, we are still recommending for social distancing, masking, and the same kind of precautions that you're going through. So I think that's something to still be doing and be cognitive of. But I do think it should allow you to hopefully breathe a little bit easier. I wouldn't be like, let me go to a giant crowd right now. I want to, go into a mosh pit. I want to go to a concert. I don't think I would feel like that, but I think it definitely allows you to breathe a little bit easier.
So several people have asked, what you're saying, I'm gonna put it in. Tell me if I'm wrong the way I'm phrasing this.
Okay.
So I can still potentially get infected from a person who's been vaccinated, right? It's a possibility.
It's a possibility.
We don't know
The
the answer.
answer is we don't know what those rates are right now. I think we're going to know a little bit more about that as we go on, and they are collecting that data. Yeah.
And if I've been vaccinated, I should make the assumption that I could potentially infect somebody else.
Yes.
So I need to take precautions for
Still take
who I
precautions.
interact. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that's just something to kind of think about. Until we know more, I think as we get more data to find out, we may find out that that's not the case. The good news is with both of these trials, Moderna, none of the individuals ended up that got the vaccine had severe COVID. So that's huge. With Pfizer, there was, I think, one individual who ended up with severe COVID that had the vaccine. So in general, it's preventing people from dying, getting the disease, dying, and having hospital and complications. That asymptomatic piece is something that we're going to have to learn a little bit more about as we get more data.
So you're saying that you wouldn't go to a rave, but we could still travel then, though, if you've gotten our vaccinations?
I would say travel with precaution. How about that? Travel still with masking, with still thinking about limiting your social interactions and that kind of thing, So
Okay.
I would think that would be reasonable at that point.
So a number of people have asked about herd immunity and how many people need to be vaccinated to reach herd immunity. What is herd immunity first, and then how many people have to get vaccinated to reach it?
Herd immunity is essentially where we have a certain number of individuals who are immune to a disease. And because of that, it kind of stops the chain of infection, because you have to have a place for the virus to be hanging out in, a particular vector. And if you're immune to that particular disease, then you shouldn't be able to actually get the disease. And if you don't have enough individuals, then collectively, even if not 100% of people have received those vaccines, they actually can prevent it because it has no place to hide out. Okay. And it's very similar to what we've seen with other diseases, very similar to smallpox, for example. I didn't have to get the smallpox vaccine because that was eradicated before I ever came around on the scene. Because there was enough immunity built up between the individuals who got smallpox vaccines where it wasn't necessary, and it has been eradicated. So the amount that's needed for that is still variable. I think if you look at some of the data, some people are saying probably somewhere between 75 to 80% of individuals that need to be, vaccinated in order to have that immunity. And that's a lot of people. And especially when you're thinking about a worldwide economy and travelers, we're not just talking about here in the United States. It's, people are being exposed to other people from all different countries. And so it's going to take a little while to be able to get that out there.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the side effect. Just one thing I don't think I covered. If I had side effects with the first vaccination, should I get a second one?
Absolutely. The only recommendation for not getting the second vaccination is if you developed anaphylaxis to the first one. And so what that would be either that you had immediate type of lip, tongue, mouth swelling that impaired your ability to breathe, instant hives, itching, trouble breathing. So if you had what we call a type 1 hypersensitivity, then it's recommended that you don't get the second dose. But like I said before, that's extremely, extremely rare. There is no other recommendation about not getting the second dose. There's actually even been individuals who happen to have acquired COVID. So I've heard of a couple of times where someone got the COVID vaccine. A couple of days later, they started having symptoms because they were exposed to COVID before they got their vaccine. Because it takes a little bit of 5 to 7 days before you start developing symptoms, and sometimes longer, sometimes 10 days. So then they developed COVID, but then they went on and decided to go ahead and get their second dose afterwards, which is still recommended. So.
Okay. So let's talk about administration of the vaccine with other medications. So, well, let's say that my arm is sore after I've gotten my vaccine. What can I do? What can I take to stop or reduce the pain?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily recommended that you take something preemptively. So it's not one of those things like, for example, I'm going to pick on my husband a little bit. Before he does a major race, he likes to pop a couple of Tylenol just in case. It's not that he's hurting, but he's worried he will be hurting. So I think that doing that before your injection is not necessarily recommended. We don't know the effect of whether or not that it shouldn't affect your immunity, but there is concerns, could it affect your immunity or not? There is no problems though with taking Tylenol or Advil if you happen to have any of the side effects afterwards. So whether that be the muscle pains, whether it be the fevers, those kind of things, it's fine for you to go ahead and take Tylenol or ibuprofen afterwards for those symptoms. The other things is just, good old ice packs and heat. So ice and heat, it's amazing what those two things can do. So after the injection, making sure that you alternate ice and heat, and that can help as well.
Okay, you mentioned if you've gotten other vaccinations, you should wait some period of time. Is that correct?
Yes.
How long?
2 weeks is the recommendation. So let's say you got your shingles vaccine last week. Then you need to wait at least another week. So there's 2 weeks in between those two particular vaccines. There's nothing that they're thinking that there will be an interaction, but just based on the recommendations and how it was studied in the trials, it's recommended to wait that extra 2 weeks. So.
Okay. So Paula asked if she's getting regular cortisone shots, what should she do? How would you counsel her?
Yes. So the good news is if it depends on what kind of cortisone shots you're getting. If you're getting in one and directly injected into, let's say, a joint space or something like that, there's actually not very high levels of that's circulating in your system. It's usually very directed to that joint. So I don't see that being a contraindication. The individuals that they didn't include in the trials were those who were taking oral steroids for the last 28 days. So I would say, though, if you've been on oral steroids within the last 28 days, to wait during that time period until you go ahead and get your vaccine.
Okay. So we just have a little bit of time left. So I'm going to try to pick the most important ones, the ones that have been asked the most.
Right.
So one of the issues is the space between shots.
Right.
There's a little bit of concern that we might not be able to do it within the recommended time period. What give me your advice or your counsel on what happens if you don't take it immediately afterwards?
Right. So what if there's a delay? I think that's what is on everybody's mind. So right now, the CDC is recommending there not be greater than a 6-week interval between your first dose and your second dose, and that being either particular vaccine, the Moderna or the Pfizer. So 6 weeks is the grace period that they give you. Now, what happens after that? They don't recommend restarting the entire series. They recommend taking that second dose as soon as you can. So I think we're going to find out a little bit more about that as time goes on. One thing I think we're going to learn about is the UK adopted a slightly different model than the United States. They decided to try to get first dose vaccines into many individuals and delay the second dose. And so they have way more people that have had the first dose than have had the second dose. So I think we're going to get more data coming out of the UK about what happens when you do that and what happens when you delay. But I think right now short answer is we don't know, but just try to get it as soon as you can.
Okay. So there's some questions we can't answer, but I'm going to ask them anyways.
Oh gosh. Okay. Let's see what happens.
Why is it taking so long?
That's complicated, David, you know that. I think there's a couple of things at play here, right? So we have these newly approved vaccines that are going worldwide. And so we only have so much that's in production at a time. And I think one of the things is that there have been some production delays. What they estimated of how much they could produce at a time, it has been under what we've actually been getting, has been under what that is. So I think that's part of it. The other piece is figuring out the logistics. You know, who knew vaccinating millions of people all at the same time would be a problem? We all knew this. I mean, have you gone to a Chick-fil-A on a Saturday at noon? I mean, you should know that you might have to wait a little bit, but at the same time, Chick-fil-A has a system and they've been able to perfect this over time. But it's like what my dad told me the other night. It's a problem though if you run out the chicken, Leigh Anne, and that's the problem we got, is that we don't have the chicken. It's not about the line. And I think he's right about that. So I think it's making sure that we get enough vaccines and logistically that we're getting it to the people that need to get it. And right now, I think we're still trying to figure that out. And I hate to say that, but I think we're learning. And, you know, I agree that we need to utilize our workforce to the very top. And that one of the things I'm just going to put a plug in here for is our pharmacists are here to help. And we are also here to immunize. I mean, if you didn't know it before today, guess what? Your pharmacist can immunize, and we are here and we need to be using, you know, pharmacists and other healthcare professionals and really make this a priority and really help get the vaccines out to individuals that need them and want them.
So personally, I'm really impatient. I want to get it right now.
No.
I'm used to going to drive-through banking and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, this is the fastest we've ever been able to get a vaccine onto the market, and a great one, an effective one. So I'm trying to be patient.
It's hard. I know it's really, really hard. And I think one of the things, and the governor talked about this yesterday in his press release, is that he wants to have more transparency around what's going on with this. And I think it's the unknown that's bugging people, is they see these numbers and they don't know what's behind the numbers, right? They see, oh, you've gotten this number of vaccines, but it's only gone in this many arms. But in reality, some of the paperwork hasn't been turned in. So in reality, we're about on pace for what we should be doing. So it's just a little bit more complicated, as you can imagine. And so, you know, one of the things I had a problem, or I was worried about, was I thought a lot of people would be really worried about taking the vaccine. And I think people are concerned, and hopefully after today, you're not as concerned about doing it, because I'm definitely pro COVID vaccine. But I think that there are so many people who want this. And I think the need is out there and people want to get back to some level of normalcy in our lives. And I think people recognize this is the path forward. But I think it's that whole waiting thing. We're not used to waiting, and that's very frustrating. So
the thing that makes it better for me is that the people that really need it are getting it. So my father's 94 years old. He got a vaccination in Columbus, Ohio. Even got in the newspaper. My
got the newspaper for it?
oh yeah, he's always getting his picture in the newspaper.
Now I know where you get this from.
Us Holdfords, we're very photogenic. But and then my wife is administering vaccine, so she's got vaccinated. My mother-in-law, who's 90, almost 90, she's just got vaccinated yesterday. No pain in her arm or anything. She was doing great. So, so I'm okay with waiting as long as the people that really need it are getting it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's frustrating, you know, even for myself. I have 2 elderly grandmothers, and they, you know, they have not been able to receive it yet because of the backlog in the areas where they live. And it's very frustrating because, you know, I even thought, I was like, if there is a way I could take my vaccine and give it to someone else, I would gladly have given it to either one of them. But that's not the option we have, right? You got to take it when it comes. And so, and more than anything, I just want people, when it is available to you and you're able to do it, you feel like you're making an informed decision about taking it.
So we have just a little bit of time left. I'm going to pick some ones that someone asked, does the vaccine have any impact on male or female fertility?
We have no data that supports that it has any effect or adverse effects on fertility in males or females. Again, most of the fertility data that we have is based on animal models, and nothing has shown that. And again, if you think about the mRNA itself, it's kind of in and out very quickly in your body. So lasting effects should be minimal. What the only thing lasting in your body after you get that vaccine are the antibodies that are formed after it has gone and left the system. So there's no reason why we think that this should have anything on that. And there has not been any studies that have shown that either. So that shouldn't really be a concern at this point.
Okay. So this one question has to do with, so VCU and VCU Health System are trying to train people. Can you give us any update on that information?
Absolutely. So VCU is doing their very best to make sure that all healthcare professionals are ready to be immunizers. And so one of the things is one of our immunizing specialists, which is Dr. Kelly Good, is helping lead the charge with that at the university, at the medical center, making sure that other healthcare professionals, so our dentists, dental hygienists, and our physical therapist, occupational therapist, she's actually working within our health college to making sure that we have training for other healthcare individuals. So they're actually going to be doing short modules to be able to educate and making sure that they are prepared as well to do immunizations. So it's very exciting. And I definitely encourage, you know, others, if you're out there and maybe you're retired or you're taking some time off, now is a great time to get in the game. You know, if you have those skills and you're able to be able to serve. I know in Virginia, the Medical Reserve Corps is available. I've actually signed up to serve in the Medical Reserve Corps to be an immunizer. I can't wait until I can go and do my first immunizing session. I just feel like once you're doing something, it feels like, yes, like this is part of, you know, the next process. And it's just really exciting. So I definitely encourage you, if you're able and you have that background, to think about signing up to be a volunteer.
So we've heard all, so this is the last question. I don't think we'll be able to get any more, but phases. We've already done, what phase are we in and what does that mean?
So we are in phase 1B. We are still immunizing people in phase 1A, which are healthcare workers, and we have moved on to phase 1B, which include frontline workers. So our first responders, our teachers, those who are working in correction facilities, factory workers, especially in food factories, those kind of things, manufacturing. And then we're looking at those 65 and up, and those 18 to 65 that have pre-existing conditions. So like, for example, those patients that are at the highest risk if they were to develop COVID. So patients with heart complications, lung complications, those kind of things, they're also eligible to get the vaccine at this point. So right now, honestly, it's just about finding a place to go get vaccinated for a lot of these individuals. So.
And then there's just one extra phase after this.
There's one extra phase, it's 1C, and that's going to be everybody else.
Everybody.
So I think that's you. I think that's
Yay.
you. So yeah, so then that's going to be 1C at that point. When do I think 1C is going to happen? The answer is, I don't know. I think it's really going to depend on supply. So at this point.
Okay. So thank you for answering all my questions so well and so concisely. And this has been a lot of fun.
It has.
I'm going to pass it on to Amy. So Amy's going to give some closing remarks.
Awesome.
Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Thank you to our moderator, Dr. David Holdford, David, and our expert panelist, Dr. Hylton Gravatt. Wow. I love hearing from you because I feel like I understand what you're saying and I don't understand a lot of things that are going on in the news and trying to read. So thank you for explaining things in layman's terms. I love the Chick-fil-A analogy. VCU alumni, faculty, staff, and family members of current students appreciate your expertise and experience you bring to this topic. Your time is incredibly valuable, as we know and recognize this is obviously a very busy time for you. So we're grateful for the work that you do, the awareness we can build, and we want to thank you for answering our questions live today. We will be reposting this webinar to Facebook and YouTube with closed captioning for later viewing. I've linked to a survey in the chat box that we would really appreciate if you could complete. We've done a lot of things to work on this from the very first one, so we want to keep improving. And if you've enjoyed listening and learning from our School of Pharmacy, please consider supporting the school with a gift. The School of Pharmacy relies on the generosity of its alumni and from our community to support its teaching mission, research, and offering great learning opportunities like the one that you've enjoyed today. To give, please visit support.vcu.edu/give/pharmacy. Thanks again for joining us today. Thanks to our moderator, Dr. Holdford, and expert panelist, Dr. Hylton Gravatt. And go Rams. We will see you next time.